somewhat, that's kind of in the way, of an impromptu stream. Not scheduled, so I'm giving people a few moments to jump on, but again, you can always watch it later. I want to see if I'm going to be able to see comments. Let me stick up chat. Okay, so I wasn't going to stream tonight. As you can tell, I've got wet hair and I was still packing. I'm getting ready to fly out to DC in not long. I need to leave the house at 3 and I've got a lot to do before then. But today, as the LP turns, just there's just some patently absurd claims. And I wanted to get this one out of the way. It interested me. It caused me to do quite a bit of research. A little bit of thinking in the noggin is really all it took, but I wanted to do some research as well. Everyone is pretty well familiar with my opinion on the whole Michigan thing. And like most of these disputes that arise, I have friends on both sides. This isn't about friends. This is about objectively looking at the facts. So now, you've got the two competing, allegedly, groups claiming the Libertarian Party name. One of them is our legitimate affiliate and the other one is not. No matter which side you're on, that's the truth, because there's only one state level affiliate. And again, the LNC has recognized, well, I can't even say has recognized, it's the same one that's always existed. There's been no lack of recognition and recognition. It's been an unbroken line. The LNC actually didn't have to do anything. It would have had to have done something to recognize the prospective usurpers. And hello, Andrew. But each day, it seems like, and this is usually the sign of people that don't have their story straight. When you got some kids running around the house and somebody broke the lamp, separate the two kids and get the stories. And then go back to each one. And as the stories evolve, you realize they're both probably fibbing. Each day, the story evolves. So here's the newest one on the Book of Faces. And that is, well, first, let's back up a bit. As everyone knows from an LNC vote, there was a authorization for a letter to be sent out to the people falsely claiming to be the Libertarian Party of Michigan to cease doing so because it's fraudulently representing a relationship with the National Party that this particular group does not have. And using, and I know some people will get triggered over this, it is what it is, a trademark name of the Libertarian Party. Now, I know there's a lot of anti-IP people in the party, and I'm an anti-IP person. Trademark isn't purely IP. There are several ways to view it, and there are several avenues to view it, but the one that I have absolutely no problem with is preventing fraud, preventing deceiving others. And that is exactly what is going on here. So read all you want. The board of directors, as it were, of the National Party has a duty to not allow its name to be used to defraud other people. There is nothing anti-libertarian about that. Further, let's pretend it was IP. It isn't, but let's pretend it wasn't. The party itself has taken no stand against IP. Lord knows I tried. I tried to get that in the platform. But as long as the party itself is divided on the issue and the National Party has registered IP, it is the duty of the board of directors to protect that thing that at least half of our members consider is property, but this isn't IP. But even in the worst case scenario, if it were, we still have that duty, but it's not. It's an anti-fraud measure, which is eminently libertarian. But, and let me just get this right out here. I'm not a trademark attorney. I'll let the attorneys handle the legal stuff. A historical and logical claim was made today. History I can handle pretty competently. And I would hope I'm at least average on logic. At least the average bear. And if the average bear can figure this out, and I know the folks on the other side are not stupid, they don't believe this either. So here's the claim now. There's a new claim. The claim is that the National Party didn't exist until June of 1972 when it adopted bylaws. I'll go to tell you how that argument, if it were true, hurts the other side far more. Because let me just ask you, when did Michigan first adopt its bylaws? If an organization can't exist until it adopts bylaws, now I could be wrong here because I'm still researching this part. But to the best of my research, the first official convention in Michigan was in 1973. I wouldn't be making the argument that an organization doesn't exist without bylaws if I were you, because that puts you even a year further out. But that is not, in fact, the case. Just like a sole proprietor can get a trademark on something, and then a year down the road, get a partner or adopt a different structure. Your structure can change. Adopting bylaws doesn't grant you the right to be able to get a trademark. You have to be an organization that is using the mark out in the public sphere in a readily identifiable way. Bylaws has nothing to do with it. That is a profoundly stupid argument. So all we need to look at is, was there some kind of organization holding itself out with this name out in the commercial sphere? And of course, yes, there was. And it pre-existed Michigan doing the same. Now, before I show you the documentary proof, and I'm always open to looking at more because the fact is, we don't have many documents from the 1970s. But we have some really good ones for this one. And what one of the other people said, well, I got people in their memories. I'm like, I'll trust documents over people and their memories of 50 years ago, any day of the week, and twice on Sunday. But just use your noodle for a second. Go back to the 70s. How much do you know about the libertarian movement in the 70s? Now, can't call myself an expert on it, but this is a really good history talking about it. We went through this on the show. We're so used today of our ideas being called libertarianism. And thank you, Nathan. I'm trying to keep the flow of thought, so that's why I'm sorry. But thank you so much, Nathan. We're so used to calling our ideas libertarian and ourselves libertarians today. That wasn't the case in 1972. That was the time of Ayn Rand. Remember, the Libertarian Party barely got called the Libertarian Party. They took a poll of the people that were loosely connected, and Libertarian barely won. We were almost the Liberty Party. This wasn't necessarily a term that everyone used, and they certainly weren't political parties, which is why David Nolan wrote the article, The Case for a Libertarian Political Party. If there was something called the Libertarian Party of Michigan in 1971, when David Nolan wrote that article right before he formed the National Libertarian Party, don't you think that would have been mentioned somewhere? Now, if you want to say there were gatherings of libertarians or objectivists or people who believed in our philosophy in Michigan in 1971, 1972, I bet there were. Every libertarian in the country knew each other's names back then. There was about 60 of us. And they had groups, they had lunch clubs, dinner clubs, and they loved exchanging their book lists. In fact, I found this guy who had a business called Liberty Coin, I think it was, that was in Michigan. But there wasn't a libertarian party. That was an absolutely novel concept that a great many, what we would now call libertarians, opposed. It only takes a moment's logic to tell you there was no libertarian party prior to the formation of the National Libertarian Party. Nobody is claiming that groups of libertarians can't get together and call themselves, you know, the libertarian luau. That's not deceptive. That's not fraudulent. The trademark is on a specific term. It's not just libertarian. That's why you have the Libertarian Policy Institute. There were newsletters called the Libertarian Forum. Anyone can use the word libertarian. It's the combination, Libertarian Party and in the political realm. That didn't exist anywhere prior to the National Party. Now, let's say at the time of the formation of the National Party, because it wouldn't surprise me if there were some political groups like way earlier, 1940s, 1950s, when the word libertarian was still pretty European and it meant communists. It wouldn't surprise me if there were some communists in the early 20th century that were called themselves a libertarian party, but none of them existed at the time of the formation of the National Libertarian Party. And most libertarians at that time would have called themselves objectivists. Most of the early founders of the Libertarian Party were objectivists. That was by far. So proving you had some get-together of libertarians that happen to be in Michigan, you think that makes the Libertarian Party of Michigan pre-exist the National Libertarian Party? That makes no sense. If we're going to use that argument, then David Nolan and his buddies meeting in Westminster in his living room before they formed an actual political party, they were the National Party. None of this logic, no matter which way you take it, helps you. But we know when the National Libertarian Party, as a distinct, identifiable entity from which you could trace back, go back yesterday before that, keep going back, and there's an unbroken line in this same organization. We know when it formed, January 1972. That's when they held themselves out as the Libertarian Party in commercial usage. And that's what it says on our trademark application as well. First use, January of 1972. So if someone is going to be making a defense of prior use, now there are all kinds of other legal arguments that I'm not going to get into because I'm not a lawyer, and I'll let the lawyers do that have to do with that's not necessarily dispositive either. However, I don't think anyone needs to go there because now we'll go to the documents. But just logically, and I used to be very mistaken on this because I didn't really know the very, very early history. Probably about 2 years ago, you could find me making a claim that I believed, and Michigan wasn't one of them, by the way, that the Libertarian Party of Colorado and the Libertarian Party of Oklahoma preceded the National Party. Now, they preceded the first convention of the National Party, but they didn't precede the National Party. There was already an LNC in January of 1972. Pretty good for a non existent organization. Now, I'm using the term and its modern usage. The LNC wasn't called the LNC until I think the 90s. They just used to be called the National Executive Committee. But I'm using today's terminology. So the National Executive Committee existed in January of 1972. Pretty hard to do that for a non existent organization. And I'm going to prove this to you. And now we're going to look at documentary evidence. And hopefully I'm going to be able to share my screen. If not, that will suck. But give me 1 second. This is just such a foolish argument. Okay. Share screen. Looks like I'll be able to do that. Okay, yes. LPedia is on the screen. So, first thing, let's go to 1972. LP News number 2. You'll notice there is a number 1, but you'll also notice, well, let's pull that up. So the first one, LP News, 1971, but it's the Committee to Organize a Libertarian Party. So that doesn't really help us. That's, this is just a loosely associated group. Really, where the name officially came into use is January 1972. And we're pulling that up right now. Oh, looky here. You got Libertarian Party up here at the top with a national headquarters, no less. And it says the Libertarian Party is the name choice. And they were having their first convention in June. Pretty good to have a newsletter with national headquarters and the name when you don't yet exist. Interesting. But let's scroll down a bit here. I think it might be in the next issue. Yeah, this is talking about the ballot requirements. And look at this. State chairman needed. Libertarian Party chairmen are needed in all states. Wait, is Michigan part of all states? I think it is, except Colorado. And that's because David Nolan, who wrote this newsletter, was the first chair in Colorado. So Libertarian Party chairmen are needed in all states except Colorado. Wait, I thought you said you guys existed before. Make it make sense. Let's go to another issue. February 1972. LP's public debut. What is that? Publicly holding yourself out and use? Yes, our public debut. a smashing success. On January 31st, the National Office of the Libertarian Party held its first press conference to publicly announce the formation of the party. But no, I'm sure some people who can't get their story straight in 2023 know better than the people who actually formed the party. Or maybe I had a magical time machine and I went back and typed this up and put it back into the stream of history just to get them and their little dog too. And looky here, temporary executive committee. There's already people on it. But, whoops, I want to go back to that issue. Let's look up Michigan. Okay, it's in the first page. During the past month, the national LP, which allegedly didn't exist, has also been active in building organizational strength. A temporary executive committee made up of leading libertarians around the country has been formed. State organizations now exist. Okay, which ones existed in February? Colorado, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming, with California, Michigan, Florida, and New York on the what? Verge of organizing. Do we believe the people telling tales on Facebook, or do you believe your lying eyes? Or was this some kind of plot that they knew about in February 1972 that they were going to put in writing that Michigan, a month after the declaration of the formation of the National Party, was on the verge of organizing, which means they didn't exist yet. They were well on their way. They were one of the early adopters, but they didn't formally exist yet. But wait, there's more. So the whole thing about the National Party not existing prior to its bylaws is not true. It's not logically true. It's not documentarily true. It's not true in any sense of the word. And as I said, on this point, I'm not quite so sure, but I'll show you the evidence I have for it as well. I don't believe Michigan adopted bylaws until 1973. So if you're going to make the argument that the National Party can't exist before it adopts bylaws, neither can you. In fact, and this I'm not sure of, I'm still researching it, and I'm trying to go back through my memory. I don't think any state parties had official conventions until 73. And I didn't see the super chat earlier, Andrew. Thank you very much. There might have been a couple that had a state convention in 72. Well, we can look that up on Lpedia. As far as I know, Michigan's first convention was in May of 1973. Let's put it this way. The old LP News mentioned every time David Nolan farted, but there's no mention in 1972 of a convention and adopting of bylaws by Michigan. None. And you might go, yeah, but they were affiliated in 1972. We'll look at an early affiliation form. Now, maybe my memory is wrong on this, as again. And thank you, Dave, for the super chat. But the early bylaws did not require you to adopt your own bylaws before you were affiliated, unlike the modern bylaws, which require that. But let's look at some more. So that was February. The next mention of Michigan is in May. As far as I can, well, May is where things start to get interesting. So LP now second largest what organization? And this was before the convention where they adopted bylaws in movement. And it says, hold on one second. LP groups are now what? Organizing, not already, organizing in 12 states. But it mentions Colorado. So we will say that that wording there is a little ambiguous. But it says, of note are the efforts in the following states. To me, this is the absolute earliest, if you don't count adoption of bylaws, which I don't think happened until 1973. This, I think, is the absolute earliest you can maybe point to any kind of formal organization in Michigan, but I don't think it was this early. I think it was after the June convention, but I'm still researching this, but I'll show you why. Michigan is mentioned here, currently numbering about 20, the Michigan LP, and they referred to all of these as an LP even before they were like official, but this is the earliest that I think I can pinpoint it to. Haven't been able to pin this down. The Michigan LP is expected to grow rapidly in the next 2 weeks. Peter McAlpine is holding an open house for Michigan libertarians on May 20th. That to me sounds like they were still organizing, but perhaps this is when they already were. But we know they weren't in February. And this is the next mention, which has been widely publicized via mailings and notice in Reason and A is A. Now, I have all of the Reason magazines from 1972. There is no notice in any of those issues. So I don't know if maybe back then you could pay to have like an insert sent with people's subscription to the magazine, or whether they planned on advertising in Reason and didn't get to it. But all I know is I looked through the 1972 Reason magazines and couldn't find a classified, a paid advertisement for this May 20th meeting that is mentioned here, which is not a convention. It's an open house. Sounds very loose to me. You sure you want to go with the argument that you're not organized until you adopt bylaws? I don't think you want to do that. I don't know we don't have any bylaws, I think, from Michigan from the 70s. I'm sure they exist out there. And I hope that this argument, this controversy stirs people up to like get crap out of their closets so we can learn more about the history. And I don't have that. I don't have any 1972 A is A. So I couldn't go and look at that magazine, couldn't find anything in Reason. Okay, go back. So maybe well, actually, no. Because, well, let's see, do we have the directory? I'm not so sure we have all of the directories, but you can see they didn't add like a contact address for Michigan. But we already know in February, a month after the National LP formed, the Michigan Party was not formed yet. Next mention here talks about when they signed a petition for affiliation. This is a weird mention. Some people could go, well, that means they organized in November of 72. No, they were already organized and recognized sometime between May and November. But there's no mention of it that I can find yet. I might have some early Michigan newsletters in storage I need to go take a look at. I might have them scanned and they're just not up on the website yet because I've got a lot of stuff that needs to be scanned. Ooh, that's not a good scan. But here it mentions affiliation petitions submitted by state LPs in Missouri and Colorado. And we know that Colorado was organized earlier, but they weren't an official affiliate apparently until November. Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, and whatever, a bunch of states, bringing the total of recognized state affiliates to 15, up from 8. Michigan was already recognized, but submitted a petition anyhow. So that's just a weird thing. But we know in February they did not exist. In May, it looks like that May 20th meeting, sometime after that, is about the closest that we can get without further information. Okay. One other thing I want to look up. And here's the first record of a Michigan convention I have is 1973. Now, perhaps there was one in 1972 that I just haven't found any mention of. There's no mention of it in LP News, and they mentioned everything. Mostly. We see there was that weird thing of when Michigan was recognized. So maybe there's some gap. I don't think so, though. I think the 73 convention was the first one. But one thing we know for a fact, in February 1972, they weren't yet organized. We saw that in black and white. But I want to see if there were any state conventions in 1972. So let's look up category 1972 state party conventions. Looks like New Jersey had one. So let's look these up. And let's see when these happened. October, and it said it was the founding convention. I think all of these happened after the National Party convention. August, after the National Party convention, which makes sense. July, after the National Party convention. So it looks like, and you want to know how we know about those 72 conventions? Because they were mentioned in LP News. That's how I made those entries, because I found them in whatchamacallit, in LP News, but there was no mention of a Michigan one. And all of the ones that were mentioned was after the June 1972 National Convention. Because I think people wanted to see if this thing was really going to get going. But since I've talked a little bit here, I do want to go back to this one black and white thing. February of 1972. California, Michigan, Florida, and New York are on the verge of organizing. They did not yet exist, even in the loosest possible definition, as an organized libertarian party. The National Party was trying to get press. It had every reason to plump its numbers. If by any stretch of the imagination, Michigan could have been considered organized, they would have. And they did not. And back to the National Party not existing. Let's look up something else. I have a newspapers.com subscription. Need to sign in. No, I don't want honey. Okay, and this is what your super chats help pay for and things like that. This newspapers.com subscription. Let's put in Libertarian Party. Probably going to want to add a date range in here, but let's put in 1971 and see if anything comes up. I haven't done this search before, so we'll see. Colorado. This is referring to the National Party. October 28th. So this is when David Nolan is still talking about it in 1971, before they even officially formed. And notice libertarians in quotes, because that wasn't yet the name of the party. And all of this is talking about the National Party and the committee to organize. And this is it. No mention of any state libertarian parties. On August 27th, 1971, let's look at this. Colorado Gazette. A group of Colorado libertarians announced the formation of a committee to organize the Libertarian Party. Okay, let's go to 1972. And there'll be a ton of mentions here. Look, 1007. Seems like somebody was using that word in commercial use. Something changed from, what was it, 8 mentions in 1971 to 1007. And we all know why. They did their first press release in January. Anyway, let's see if there's any mentions of Michigan. Now, remember, they didn't used to be, none of the state parties were called the Libertarian Party of X at that time. They were all ex-Libertarian parties. So Michigan would have been called the Michigan Libertarian Party at that time. Let's take a look. For February 7th, 1972, mentioned out of Texas. Let's see. I don't see, where is Michigan? This is about the National Party. And it looks like they were on the verge of forming, and then party organizations have been set up in Michigan. So I think we can date it to February, after the National Party formed. Very early. I think they were plumping the numbers here a little bit, but not before. So that's the only mention of the Michigan Party. It's not even mentioned in Michigan. It's mentioned in Fort Worth in an interview with David Nolan, where the Libertarian Party formed. So, I think there's one other thing I wanted to look at. Now, one second, let me stop this screen share. So Michigan was definitely one of the early ones, but it didn't pre-exist the National Party. Oh, I know what else I wanted to show you guys. Colorado, Oklahoma, Michigan, Texas, Utah were all very early, within the first 12, but they didn't pre-exist the National Party. Even if we're only talking about a month. Because when the February LP News went to press, which was probably judging from when I go through this, the last week in January, Michigan was on the verge of organizing. By February 7th, at least no one was willing to say in a newspaper interview that they had an organization. But I think that might have been used kind of loosely, but we can use the February date. It still didn't pre-exist. Okay. Oh, something else I want to show you. Now, we don't have all of the signed affiliation agreements from the states from back then. I might still yet find them, but we do have ones that were used in that time period. Rhode Island is one of them. I want to show you what the petition looked like back then. Look at, I don't know if I'm sharing the right screen. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen right now. Hold on. Right here. Okay. Is the right? Nope, it's not. Hold on. Because it opened in a new tab. Stop screen sharing, share a new one. Why? Which one is it? Oklahoma, Oklahoma, that's not it. Is this it? Yeah, okay. Let me share this. So I want you guys to take a look at the first paragraph. We understand that as an affiliate state Libertarian Party, we will have the right to use the name Libertarian Party and the party's symbol and slogan. That is the affiliation form signed at that time. And that is what Michigan would have signed. Do I have the signed form? Not yet. Might find it, but that is the form that was in use at that time. So the absolute earliest from a secondary news source, being the Dallas-Fort Worth, in an interview with Nolan, the absolute earliest that you could potentially say a Michigan LP existed is February. The National Party formed January. It did not pre-exist. It was super early, but it didn't pre-exist. And in the official records, February 1972 LP News, it says Michigan is on the verge of organizing. And again, if you want to make the argument that you didn't exist till you had bylaws, I don't think you had bylaws till 1973. At the latest, late 1972, which means that the National Party's bylaws still pre-existed yours. Again, very close. No one is not going to deny that Michigan was an early party. Colorado was earlier, and we still didn't pre-exist the National Party. National Party probably pre-existed us by like 5 minutes because David Nolan was the same guy who did both. The state that could maybe win an argument that they pre-existed is Colorado, and I don't think they pre-existed either. At one time, I did think that. I don't think that anymore. It's just not possible. And Oklahoma and Colorado, I think, are the first two. Maybe Utah, because Carl Bray was out there. Now, all of this, though, is somewhat academic. Why? Because the only group that has the right to argue about whether or not they had a pre-existing use that would entitle them to use the name over and above the objections of the person, the organization which granted the use, is the actual affiliate. The people who are not the actual affiliate can't make that argument because they never had a right to it. To say some other group that you don't legitimately control had some kind of pre-existing claim is irrelevant because you have no claim at all. But I went through the history of it just because I thought it was very interesting and that I could find no proof that they pre-existed. Now, again, even if they did, which they didn't, they would have signed that affiliation agreement, which acknowledged that it is by virtue of affiliation that they got to use the name. So they contracted that away, even if they did pre-exist, which they did not. And I find it super interesting and why I think David Nolan was plumping his numbers. If they, without a doubt, they were affiliated in 1972. But there's no mention of them in any Michigan newspaper, at least on newspapers.com in 1972. I wonder if they get mentioned in 1973. I'm doing all these searches right in front of you. I don't know what I'm going to find. Because you want to know who does that? People who just care about what the facts are. Okay, I want to search. I want to share a different tab. Let's look for Michigan Libertarian Party for 1973. None. Wow, you guys had some big thing going on there. Well, let's see if maybe the newspaper got it wrong. Let's see if they had it as Libertarian Party in Michigan. So let's see here. Okay, they did get the name wrong because I don't think you guys used the name, but there's one mention, May 25th, 1973, which mentions the convention that I knew about. And it does say annual, leaving open the possibility that you had one in 72. I don't see any evidence of that. Let's look. Okay, using the word Libertarian Party of Michigan, there's one mention, October 19th, 1972. And that's not actually, the words aren't together. It says the presidential campaign of the new Libertarian Party rolled into Michigan. It's not even talking about the Michigan Party. So there's no newspaper evidence, at least on newspapers.com in your own state, that there was any kind of presence of a Libertarian Party in Michigan. There was some loose coalition that the Libertarian National Party recognized because they were trying to organize states and say they have organized states. At the most generous, it was in February, sometime after the writing of the February 1972 LP News. Okay, I think that might be it. I don't know if there's anything that I missed. Let me stop this share. One other thing. One second. I'm just doing one other search here. There we go. Why wouldn't interesting figures a government site isn't working? Let me try. Let me try a different. I have a copy of this document. Here we go. One second. Yeah, this is not displaying properly, but I am looking at the trademark registration, first use in commerce, January 1972. Again, I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to deal with all of the issues surrounding that, but I did want to deal with the historical issue of, did any formal state parties pre-exist the National Party? And as far as I can tell, the answer is no. The only two that I think might be able to challenge that claim, maybe three: Oklahoma, Utah, and Colorado. With Colorado, probably because it was the same person who did both, possibly Colorado, not Michigan. You missed it. You missed it by a little bit. And I would drop the argument that you had to have bylaws, because I could tell you one thing you didn't have in February: bylaws. I wonder what the earliest sets of bylaws we have for state parties. That would be something interesting too. So, category: state party bylaws from the 1970s. Now, this won't be dispositive because these are super early documents. The earliest set of bylaws we even have a copy of from anybody is New York in 1975. That's not dispositive. A lot of state parties would have had bylaws by then. It's just early documents are hard to come by. One other thing I wanted to look at before we go. Now, yeah, there's no newsletters up here for Michigan. I know you guys had newsletters. They probably need to be uploaded. Bummer. I would have liked to have looked through some newsletters. But there are some other things I will want to throw out here. But again, legal arguments. let the lawyers make them. I've raised these facts before. The initial bylaws of the LP didn't contain the language today, which says only those entities affiliated have the right to use the name Libertarian Party, or so on and so forth. We all know that I'm not having the wording exact what the modern bylaws say, but we already saw that the 1970s affiliation agreement say that. So I think they moved it from the affiliation agreement into the bylaws. I am not exactly sure when that language was added to the national bylaws. We might be able to figure that out somewhat. And that is important because national bylaws. Let's just look at one here just quickly. Okay, that language was not in there in 1980. I bet you it got added somewhere around 1990. Yep, 1991. No person, group, or organization may use the name Libertarian Party or any confusingly similar designation except an organization to which the party grants affiliate status. That used to be the gist of what was on the affiliation form. So it first appeared in the national bylaws in 1991. All the state parties were aware of that. After some time, if you stay with a group and that's the contract, you're agreeing to abide, you're to be an affiliate of the national party, means under the terms of the national party bylaws, you had an obligation at some point, if you didn't agree with that provision, to sever the relationship. It's been in there since at least 1991. I think that's when it got added, to be honest with you, is in 1991. Because while we're here, we're going to pull up the bylaws of the Libertarian Party of Michigan. Let me share my screen. Right here. Purpose. The purpose of this organization is to further the principles of individual liberty as expressed in the Statement of Principles of the National Libertarian Party, blah, 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 and affiliating with the National Libertarian Party. So your own bylaws say one of the purposes is to affiliate with the National Libertarian Party. One of the conditions of affiliation is that part of the contract is that you get to use the term or the name by virtue of your affiliation. Now, whether that's a legal argument that would hold up, I don't know. I think it is. But the historical argument, no, you didn't pre-exist the National Party. And you certainly didn't have bylaws prior to the National Party. And I seriously doubt you had bylaws prior to June 1972. It was close. You were one of the early ones, but not early enough. All right, guys. I hope you found the delve into history interesting, and I hope you have an awesome night. Bye-bye.